I'm sorry. That one's perfectly fine. Come on, Mario!
Mushroom Kingdom, here we come!
Mario isn't just a video game character, he's the video game character, a global icon who helped define an entire industry. And behind him, the legendary Shigeru Miyamoto, the creative force who shaped Mario into what he is today. For over 30 years of Mario's existence, Miyamoto was inextricably linked to the success, cultural proliferation, and iconic status of everyone's favorite overalls-wearing plumber. But in the cold, harsh light of modern day, has Mario finally outgrown his creator? If you're a longtime Super Mario Bros. Fan, you undoubtedly know the story. Mario originally appeared in a little game called Donkey Kong. His name? Jumpman. And he was visually intended to appear as a carpenter. This was a last-minute pivot though, as he was originally going to appear like Popeye. As the game was a wild success, the people involved in Donkey Kong started brainstorming how they could spin off this Jumpman into his own game. And thus, the Mario Brothers was born just 2 short years later in 1983. The character would be renamed in honor of Mario Segal, Nintendo of America's landlord, and pivoted into a plumber, and the rest is history. Following in rapid succession, you had Super Mario Bros. In 1985, Super Mario Bros. 2 in 86, and Super Mario Bros. 3 in 88. And even though these games could sometimes take up to 2 years to be translated and re-released in America, however, one thing was certain: the world loved Mario. Mountains of merchandise, toys, and animated TV shows were looming on the horizon, and a global franchise was in the making. After the release of the middling 1993 live-action movie, Mario games continued to be released and re-released throughout the 90s and 2000s. However, box office success seemed to elude the character perennially. Part of this was due to the reluctance of Shigeru Miyamoto to embrace story in the games Nintendo produced. His guiding principle of game design is that the game's core thesis should directly relate to a verb. Thus, Jumpman. What does Mario do? He jumps. That's the action that the game is helping the player live out. Jumping. Miyamoto would stay at Nintendo, rising through the ranks, and was deeply involved in almost everything the company made. From producing games to directing to being just an overarching figurehead, the man was the closest thing early video games had to some sort of wonderkind. And as if that wasn't enough, he also created Legend of Zelda, Star Fox, and Pikmin. In fact, in the year 2002, Nintendo actually made him an executive. He's held quite a few titles over the years, and he's been helping to guide Nintendo through the choppy waters of the video game industry for longer than most people can even comprehend. Has he made some mistakes? Sure. But we can all recognize his brilliance at designing and creating beloved games. But herein lies an interesting pressure point. Despite games being a bigger industry than Hollywood, the movie industry is the way to cultural acceptance and ubiquity. Should it be this way? Of course not. But grandmas and grandpas don't know what Halo or Uncharted or Baldur's Gate is unless a movie or TV show gets made. It's just a reality of the way things are absorbed into the culture. Obviously, the first Super Mario Bros. Movie was a failure, but with multiple animated shows and failed attempts at launching new movies having faltered, it was only a matter of time before the rubber met the road and Mario and Luigi would be back on the big screen in some form. One of the difficulties in making a real adaptation of the broader Mario universe is the fact that there's a lot of fan-favorite characters and not a lot of narrative purpose for them. Like, yes, on a primal level, there's a story involving Mario rescuing a princess at the core of the Mario games, but it's one steeped in folklore and, for lack of a better term, video game logic. You know what I mean? Bowser is a massive turtle, Mario is a plumber, and Peach is a literal princess. But also there's Wario and Toad, and a vast list of characters that are known to most players by their character design, not an actual story with pathos and emotion. If you were pitching this idea to a contemporary movie producer, they'd laugh you out of the building. It took quite some time to figure out what a modern Mario movie would even be. Turns out, it's just a Mario movie. It's gorgeously animated, finds narrative things for all the characters to do, and also still sticks fairly close to what's been established in the games. In fact, maybe a little too closely. One of the major critiques of the movie was the fact that it had a bad case of the member berries, as in it has a string of sequences, characters, and callbacks to the games. Which, is that great? No, it's not. However, that's also just what all movies are these days, which is nothing short of extremely depressing. Nintendo, after having dealt with outside companies for a long time, has stopped licensing their characters. They're now taking on the prospect of developing and creating their own films and TV shows. Could that be good? Maybe, but there's only one problem. Miyamoto is currently in charge of Nintendo's new film adaptation efforts. The guy who literally was like, less story, more action-based gameplay. The new sequel to the Super Mario Bros. The movie, titled The Super Mario Galaxy Movie, is actually a perfect example of the push and pull internally at Nintendo. When the original Mario Galaxy game was being released, Miyamoto was pushing for as little story as possible throughout the development process, and this fight even carried over to the second game as well. One notable key exception: Rosalina's storybook. If you don't remember, you gradually unlock chapters of this whimsical storybook throughout the game. This side of things isn't essential, it's skippable if you really want to. It's basically Rosalina's backstory. This was one of the fan-favorite elements of the game, and directly in opposition of Miyamoto's wishes, obviously. However, this aspect has taken on such a popularity that they are now publishing it as a real book. So it's gone from this optional, almost hidden side thing to a more mainstream and beloved aspect of the game. It's also notable that Galaxy came out 2 decades ago, but Rosalina's like the most recent new character to have become a mainstay in the series. Anyone else new usually only pops up in the game they're introduced, and then they're abandoned. And this backstory is a key factor in her having cultural staying power. When it came time to make Mario Galaxy 2, the same fight was had by Miyamoto and the director of the game. Despite Rosalina's popularity, Miyamoto was campaigning for less story, and he got his way, which is why Galaxy 2 isn't as popular as the original. Simply put, Miyamoto's outlook on game construction is rapidly aging out of relevancy. In an interview with Wired, he's quoted as having said, "They always want to have these dramatic scenes where Princess Peach gets kidnapped, but I always tell them no, it's fine. Princess Peach likes cake. So you can just have them use cake as bait to kidnap Princess Peach, and that's enough," which is just nothing short of unhinged. And now we have a movie adaptation of Galaxy coming out, and Miyamoto is in charge of all these adaptations. The guy who doesn't like story, in charge of the stories. Sure. Look, the Super Mario Bros. Movie was what it was. It could have been so much worse, and this new Galaxy movie, turns out it was just more of the same. The real question is, how are they going to handle the other titles in their catalog? Well, the next game to be adapted is going to be Legend of Zelda, which for some reason is not another animated film. It's a live-action Legend of Zelda adaptation. Zelda is a franchise much like Mario, where there's a simple fetch quest that takes our hero on a long journey through strange and unknown lands. However, unlike the Mario world, the Zelda aesthetic doesn't have to be animated, but it would be better if it was. Link and the other supporting characters would be better in a more expressionistic and surreal environment. However, that's not the path they're taking. Miyamoto just doesn't really seem like someone who's well suited for understanding the core of these characters and games. He's well suited for designing game mechanics and fun puzzles to solve. You know, Peach Likes Cake is his idea of a compelling character motivation. Banking off the momentum of the previous installment, beautiful animation, and an audience that's primed to want more of the same, the new Mario Galaxy movie has been a box office smash, though not exactly a critical darling. In fact, without spoiling it here, some of the additions and changes made to the lore weren't very well received by fans. It seems that in the grave new frontier of franchise management and strategic planning that it takes to build a raft of compelling adaptations, Miyamoto kind of seems like the exact worst person to take on this challenge. Well, maybe not the worst. At least it's not Zack Snyder. And well, that's all we have for this episode of Nerdstalgic. What do you think? Will Nintendo be able to keep up with the level of quality that we're all hoping for? Let us know in the comments below, and as always, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more videos just like this.